Greetings, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and welcome back to another video. Recently, it has been brought to my attention that there have been some, law changes in a fun place called Florida. And these changes include changes to the education system and the curriculum and what is allowed to be shown in class, to now they are allowed to use PragerU Kids videos in the classroom for educational purposes in the state of Florida, which is so terrifying. They said that this was to combat left-wing propaganda, which is just so beyond me, right? You see all these right-wingers sort of saying that they're bringing inclusivity into their classrooms, which is left-wing propaganda somehow, but the way to combat it being bringing literal right-wing propaganda into the classroom is just so beyond me. If you don't know who PragerU is, they're basically a very right-wing, very conservative educational channel. They make a lot of videos on their website, on YouTube, and they have an entire kids section as well, which is now obviously what is available in the classrooms. But they are very heavily Christian and they promote Christianity, which is super fun to do in public schools. They also, have all the beliefs of, being transphobic and homophobic. They push traditional Christian values, including with masculinity and femininity. They are climate change deniers. They downplay a lot of history and they teach incorrect history. They just hold a lot of misogynistic and racist values, all of which are put in their videos, and all of which are now completely okay to show in classrooms, which is so scary and such a massive step backwards. The fact that, kids are not allowed to be taught what gay means. That's not allowed to be said in a classroom, yet you're allowed to actively teach discrimination is just so absolutely beyond me and so awful and scary. And today I wanted to look through some of the things that have now been approved to show in classrooms so that we can talk about it and we can sit here and be horrified together, because I think it's important to know what's going on and these things that are happening. And they have a lot of content that's just so, I cannot believe they say it, let alone are allowed to teach it. And I think we need to talk about it, just knowing what your kids are being taught and what is allowed to be taught and making sure you understand the curriculum that your kids are being given. And I think that is important to talk about. But before we get into it, I would like to say a massive thank you to today's patron, Alex. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for all of your support. And I really hope that you enjoy this video. If anyone else would like to become a patron, it means a lot. I appreciate the support. Anything helps, and it starts at as little as £1 a month. So yeah, I appreciate it. All right, let's get into the video. PragerU Kids have a bunch of different series that follow different characters, and one of those series includes Leo and Leia's Adventures, which is the story of these two kids, Leo and Leia. They are younger brother, older sister, and they travel through time to meet important historical figures. A video will start with Leo having a question or a conundrum, and Leia will come in and they'll be like, how do we figure this out? Let's go find answers. And they'll travel back in time to meet a historical figure like George Washington or Christopher Columbus. These obviously include a lot of misinformation and a lot of just trying to deflect responsibility, and teaching just really terrible values. And one of those videos that is just so shocking to me is Leo and Leia meet Booker T. Washington, where they go back to 1905 to have a conversation with Booker T. Washington. This video starts with Leo having a conundrum, basically. He doesn't want to make himself a snack. He wants his family to. He doesn't want to, do things for himself. He expects the others to because he's the baby of the family.
Mom, I'm hungry. Mom, I'm bored.
And his sister comes in and is like, Why don't you do it for yourself? Have some independence. And he's like, what's independence? I do not know the meaning of that word. What does this mean?
Can you make me a snack?
Are your legs broken?
Ugh, rude.
You need to start being able to take care of yourself a little.
But I'm the youngest in the family. You guys are supposed to take care of me.
And she's like, let's travel back in time to meet someone, to learn what independence is. And then they travel through time where they are at a university and they meet Booker T. Washington, who tells them a little bit about what it means to be independent. Booker T. Washington, if you aren't aware, is a black man who was a slave, and he, was liberated and he was no longer a slave, and he was able to live a pretty successful life. Like, he managed to get like an education, and he built a university and was a professor at the university, which, is very, very cool. It would have been an incredibly difficult thing to do. Going from being a slave to being like a very successful person is an incredible feat. And they downplayed this a lot, and also just like kind of abused his story. So this conversation included some like incredibly inappropriate comments in order to deflect responsibility from white people of today and say that, we don't owe anyone anything. There's no racism left in the US. It's an incredible country full of incredible opportunities for everyone. And they said this.
And I hate slavery too, but it's been a reality everywhere in the world. And even now in 1910, it's still happening in other countries. Despite our nation not always living up to our declaration that all men are created equal, I am still so proud and thankful to be an American.
Even though you were a slave?
Exactly. Thousands of men gave their lives in a war that resulted in my freedom. So yes, I am proud and thankful.
Which, holy shit. It is absolutely beyond me to the fact that they can include a thing saying that they're like grateful, saying that slavery, they wouldn't change it, they wouldn't change it. Like, yeah, being a slave kind of sucks, but hey, I learned independence. I learned valuable skills, and now I'm successful. You cannot use the success story of one person to push an entire thing and say that, hey, it's all okay. There were slaves everywhere. Just because there were slaves everywhere, firstly, doesn't make it okay. Like, that doesn't automatically erase the fact that it was a wrong thing to do, And like, also, I don't think they were grateful. I don't think anyone was grateful. Some people, sure, may, tell themselves certain things in order to deal with the pain and the trauma, because that's a coping mechanism. That's how you cope with it. And they are allowed to say that to themselves. You are not allowed to say that to them or on behalf of them, right? Like, if someone has horrific trauma, in order to live with that and deal with that, they may say to themselves, it made me stronger. It gave me the skills that I have today in order to be able to deal with that pain and get through it. The second you come in and say, but it made you stronger. Look at, you wouldn't be where you are without, you are the worst person. You are not allowed to say that, because that is incredibly invalidating, and it's justifying the way that they were treated, which is never, ever okay. You cannot come in here and put that on him. You cannot say that out of his mouth. Pretending that you are him and speaking on behalf of them and saying things like that is completely, completely inappropriate and such an incredibly messed up thing to do. And to be teaching children that slaves were grateful and are proud to be American and were happy to be American after they were freed is an insane thing to do. And on top of that, saying that people of today shouldn't feel any responsibility. It's not our fault what our ancestors chose to do.
But know that you have nothing to be sorry about. You and Leo have done nothing wrong and have indeed been quite respectful. Future generations are never responsible for the sins of the past.
There's so many things wrong with that. I don't think they realize, no, they choose not to look at it because they don't want to deal with it or face any repercussions or do anything about it. But you have to think about it like this, right? You, as a white American in 2023, do still hold some responsibility and do still owe something to them, because you are still, all these years later, reaping the benefits of slavery. You are still reaping the benefits of your ancestors, not even that far back, like your great-grandparents having slaves, or, you know, at least being treated as much higher people. Whereas African Americans are still dealing with the consequences of slavery. They're still dealing with the consequences of their grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. being slaves. When slaves were liberated and slavery was outlawed, they weren't allowed the same things as white people were, right? Where did they go? What did they have? They were not treated as people still. They didn't have rights. They weren't allowed to own property. They weren't allowed to vote. They weren't allowed to do any of that. So they are stuck in this area of like poverty that they're unable to get out of, because they're also, you know, not able to get like a good education. They're not allowed to get jobs. Or if they do get jobs, it's very, very poorly paid jobs. It's very difficult for them to get jobs. They're discriminated against so much. And that's a very, very hard cycle to break out of. And so a lot of African Americans still live in poverty, and they still live under this, you know, social discrimination because they weren't allowed things in the past. And they're still discriminated against today. Of course, it's still harder to get jobs, it's still harder to get opportunities, it's still harder to get an education, etc. Whereas as white people, that's never been a problem for you. You still hold all the privilege because you've always held the privilege. And even if, you know, Black people are allowed to vote and they're allowed to get educations and they're allowed jobs and there's no segregation, you cannot deny that it doesn't still exist. And that is a direct result of the slavery that happened. So they do deserve reparations. They do deserve to have like extra scholarships, and they do deserve to be given a boost. If you are still reaping the benefits and they are still facing the consequences, it's not an even playing field, and you do still owe them because you are still contributing to that cycle. Whether you chose to or not doesn't matter. You didn't choose to be privileged, but they didn't choose to be discriminated against. They didn't choose to be dealing with the consequences of that. You didn't choose to be dealing with the privileges of that. So, like, the thing to do is to make that equal. Use your privilege to help. Use your privilege to even the playing field, to give them more opportunities. You know, just as you didn't choose for your ancestors to be slavers, they didn't choose for their ancestors to be slaves. And one of those things is much worse than the other. Another fun episode of Leo and Leia's adventures is when they go back to meet Christopher Columbus. And this story is set up by it being Christopher Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day. And Leo is incredibly confused because some people are calling it Indigenous People Day and some people are calling it Christopher Columbus Day. Some of his teachers are saying they love Christopher Columbus, and some of them are saying he's a terrible person, and he's confused.
Yeah, some of the teachers at my school really don't like Christopher Columbus and don't think he should have a holiday, but some do.
It's the same with my teachers, and even some kids got into arguments about it today.
He doesn't know what's right and what's wrong and what he should believe, and so we should go back in time and meet Christopher Columbus and find out for ourselves.
But both sides are just giving their opinions. It would be cool to hear from, you know, the source.
You want us to go talk to Christopher Columbus, don't you?
Yeah!
Okay, sounds good.
As though that's not going to be an incredibly biased opinion. You go ask the man himself, you're like, are you a good person or a bad person? What do you think the answer's going to be? I don't think going straight to the source to like find out if he's good or bad is like the best way to figure this out. Not that they're actually going back and talking to him, but like regardless, the premise is a bit ridiculous because that's obviously going to go in favor of him because you're getting the information from him. If you really wanted to find out, you would go back and you would talk to him, but you would also talk to the Indigenous people. You would talk to everyone involved, not just the man who did the murder, you know? So they go back and they meet Christopher Columbus on his ship. They go and they confront him and they're like, you know, some people, you're very controversial. Some people really don't like you.
There are a lot of people in our time upset about how you acted once you found all these amazing things in these new lands. I heard at school that you spoiled paradise and you brought slavery and murder to peaceful people.
And his sort of rebuttal on this is being like, well, they weren't peaceful. You're being lied to. They were cannibals. We met this tribe that were really lovely and peaceful, and we really liked them, and I told my crew to respect them because, you know, they were civil. So we respected them. However, there was this other tribe that would come and just eat them. They were cannibals, and so they were savages. they weren't peaceful at all. And so naturally the conclusion I came to was to go enslave them and fight them and murder them, because, you know, that seems reasonable. Keep the peace.
The first people we met were great. The Taino. They were peaceful, curious, and really helpful. I could tell right away that they were highly intelligent. But it wasn't exactly a paradise of civilization. They told me about the Caribs, who are vicious, warring cannibals.
It's so funny to me because, like, he even mentioned that he was like, just like our country, just like in Europe, you know, it's not always peaceful. Even in this paradise, you know, war still happens. People still die and are murdered, and there's still slavery and such.
All the things that are bad in the world I come from, jealousy, lying, murder, war, it all exists in the land I just found too.
And it's like, okay, you're not helping the point. This is the thing, right? Is it's like, yeah, it's not peaceful, but neither are you. And I know that we view cannibalism as bad and gross, and I agree, cannibalism is bad and gross, but I feel like that happens way less than, you know, like public executions happened in Europe. Like public executions, games of like poor people killing each other, literally just like murder happening on the street, like wars being fought over fucking nothing. To argue that that's more civil just because it's done with what, like guns, is just absolutely ridiculous to state. And I just don't really see how this is helping the case at all. Like, you want to talk about how you're less cruel while you're, you know, letting poor people die in the streets, public executions, and coming into this other country and just killing everyone for not agreeing with your values or what you think civility is. And you want to claim that you're more peaceful? I don't understand how this argument even holds any ground at all, just because you say it in a calm manner, just because you say it in a way that sounds convincing. But that's the problem, right? Is saying this to kids in a way that's viewed as like entertaining and like historically accurate, and they're saying it so calmly, you don't really sit and question everything, because when you're a kid, you haven't really developed, you know, the sensibility to question those things and to think things through on a deeper level, because you just kind of trust what you're being told and you will take it in the tone that it's being told to you in, which is why it's so horrifying. And it's so scary and so awful, because you're coming in and teaching kids that it's okay to like discriminate and hurt people who don't agree with your beliefs, that other cultures aren't as civilized. If people live differently to you, then it's okay to judge them and hurt them, and that, you know, they are less than you. And that's such a dangerous thing to be teaching kids. We should be teaching kids to like accept other cultures and celebrate other cultures and celebrate differences. And the fact that you've become so afraid of differences and like refuse to teach kids to accept differences and celebrate them is so awful. And the poor kids in class that are, you know, Native American or of any other culture or religion are going to be feeling so attacked and hurt by this. On top of this series, they have a few like standalone sort of videos on teaching you how to have traditional values. Including 2 videos that are how to embrace your masculinity and how to embrace your femininity, which go pretty much exactly how you expect them to. And the fact that these are classed as educational content is kind of ridiculous and just like, oh my god. The fact that we aren't allowed to talk about gender in class, you know, we're not allowed to talk about gender roles and, you know, being yourself, because how dare you do that? That's encouraging people being trans and gay. What we have to do is talk about gender, but we have to talk about it very strictly as what you have to do if you are a boy and what you have to do if you are a girl. There's no in between and no crossover. And they are teaching exactly the values that you think they will be, which is very upsetting, because you'd think by now we would have broken away from this, and, you know, we were, but you know. So the How to Embrace Your Masculinity video is entirely hosted by men who are teaching little valuable lessons to boys about what it means, starting with saying how masculinity is not toxic, despite what you have been told.
Masculinity is not about having the biggest muscles or the best mustache. And despite what some confused people think, masculinity is not toxic.
We'll get into that in a little bit, but like, that's such an annoying thing to say, because they so deliberately overlook the point of what we mean when we say toxic masculinity. But again, we'll get into that in a moment, because because it comes up again. But like this includes advice like be independent and think for yourself. Form your own opinions. Don't let anyone tell you how to think, which is so ironic considering that's all of what these videos are, is just telling you what to believe and think.
Real masculinity is about becoming independent in a healthy way. It means becoming a strong person who's able to think for yourself and take responsibility for your life.
But the main core of this video, the number one like important thing about being a man or being masculine, is to be strong.
Number 2, be strong. Deep down, every man wants to be strong. And it can go too far. The desire to be strong is a good thing. Sometimes life requires you to be strong, whether it's protecting your loved ones or moving a couch. Having strength when you need it is satisfying and useful. Just don't let it go to your head. Taking on stupid dares and trying to prove how strong you are just makes you look insecure. And being too eager to get into a fight makes you look like an idiot.
It's so funny because, guys, that's what toxic masculinity is. Like, it's so funny. The whole point of this video being like, toxic masculinity isn't real. Masculinity is not toxic. And then the first thing is like, but be masculine, but not like in a toxic way, is so amusing because like, yeah, that is what we've been saying. The thing is that saying being masculine is being strong means that a lot of people internalize that as needing to have all the power, as needing to get into fights all the time and show dominance and be like strong in a way of being like brutally strong and being violent and taking out anger and internalizing everything as anger. That's what toxic masculinity is. Masculinity itself is not toxic. It's when you take it to the extremities that it becomes toxic. And you are sitting here being like, be masculine, but not in a toxic way. Like, yeah, that's what we've been saying. You just refuse to acknowledge that that's what we're talking about. A lot of toxic masculinity exists. There are a lot of people who take masculinity too far, who internalize it too much, who make it into being angry and possessive and controlling, and who are insecure about it, so lash out. Which again, they say, don't be insecure about your strength. Don't be insecure about your independence and who you are, because then you're gonna lash out. That is what toxic masculinity is. It's wild to me that you refuse to acknowledge that. You refuse to acknowledge that masculinity and toxic masculinity are two different things. The problem is that people like you push masculinity so much and talk about how important it is that a lot of people become very toxic about it because they view it as the most important thing they have to be. And that is your fault. Then they also include points such as like, be courageous. You know, every little boy has a superhero, whether that be like Superman or an actor or a book character or etc. Every little boy has a superhero.
Every boy has a hero, whether it's Superman or a football star. And it's a really strong source of inspiration.
And they talk about how little boys have to persevere. You know, you have to get through anything, that you are strong, that you can face anything and you can make it. Just be courageous, be strong, you know, have someone you admire and push through anything and you can do it. You are strong and you can achieve anything. And that's part of what being masculine is. It's having a goal and always striving to reach it.
One thing that good heroes have in common is that they don't walk away from challenges. They're confident and they overcome obstacles with determination and grit. They don't give up when things get tough and they don't let disappointment defeat them.
And the final point is telling them to be a gentleman, you know, be kind and respectful to people and just do kind things and don't let your masculinity become too toxic, which is quite amusing again. But these are all, you know, relatively good points for anyone to a degree, you know, be strong and fight for what you believe in, respect people and be kind, you know, persevere through things and, you know, you can overcome any obstacle if you put your mind to it and like, I believe in you, be strong, never give up. Like those are good things to teach everyone. They're not inherently masculine traits. The only problem is when they become like, you have to do all of these things and you're never allowed to show weakness, which they don't necessarily say, but again, kids will often internalize it that way because they never mention vulnerability in there at all. It's very much like, you will get through anything. You will push through everything and overcome everything. And that can be kind of dangerous. You also need to tell kids it's okay to be vulnerable and ask for help, and that it's okay to struggle. The problem comes in a lot when you get to how to embrace your femininity. Now, for some reason, this isn't entirely hosted by women. Is it because not enough women work at PragerU? Possibly. But this is hosted by one woman and then one man. But the man only comes in for the second point, which is telling women to be positive. Girls have to be positive because the most beautiful thing a girl can do is smile.
One of the most beautiful things God has created is a woman's smile. It can fill a room with energy and joy. Just try smiling and see how it affects the people around you.
I hate that they got a man in to tell women to smile more. It's like actually insane. Why did you need to get the man in to say one thing and it was telling girls to smile because it's beautiful? A grown man telling children that they have to smile because it's beautiful. So odd. So unnecessary. What? Why? Other than that, this video starts off by saying that, you know, femininity has been lost and people are wearing femininity and womanhood as a costume, which is not okay.
Being feminine isn't a costume. It's something to be proud of.
And I always find this so interesting because they never talk about this from trans men. You know what I mean? They always talk about transness being wrong when it's trans women. And I do believe that comes down to the fact that they view masculinity as like the default. It's not something you can steal. It's not something you can steal. As a woman, you shouldn't be masculine. You should be thriving for femininity. But femininity and women are viewed as like objects, right? And so when someone who they don't view as a woman is trying to be feminine, it's like they're robbing women because this is what a woman is. They are entirely just this set of rules and they are property. They are owned, and it's not okay to come in and steal that because that belongs to women and women belong to me. No one can steal masculinity because there's nothing special about masculinity. It's just the default. On top of that, this video is filled with a bunch of other fun tips like don't eat too much, make sure to exercise and look after yourself and make sure you're always looking good. Always clean your space so that you always live in a clean and tidy area so that it's nice. You got to keep your personal hygiene up. You've got to look beautiful and you have to dress nicely at all times, but you can't show too much skin. This is like an entire point, is basically just make sure you look nice all the time.
You've got to respect yourself. Think about it like treating yourself as someone you care about. Start taking your hygiene and fitness seriously. Don't eat too much trash food and keep your environment from being a dump. And dress well. Just make sure it's appropriate. Don't expose parts of your body that would send the wrong message about who you are.
You have to present yourself nicely, you have to look appealing, and you have to live in a clean space all the time. And that is a feminine value. That is a core part of what makes you a woman. So smile more and always be happy and always look your best and always live in a clean place. Make sure you dedicate all of your time to cleaning yourself and your environment. Those are very important fundamental parts to being a woman. And I just love how superficial that is compared to telling boys to be confident and strong and persevere and overcome all obstacles. You're telling girls to stay home and look after themselves and their space and do nothing else. And you're telling boys that they have to be strong and powerful and confident and overcome things. And there's also the point of, you know, don't let yourself be independent. Don't lie to yourself and say that you can be independent. Let a man into your life and let him take care of you.
Don't be afraid to allow men in your life to help you. You don't have to pretend to be the fierce, independent woman. Don't be offended when a gentleman opens the door or offers to carry something for you.
I've never been offended by anyone opening a door for me, ever. I don't know why anyone would be offended by that. I hold doors open for people all the time. People hold doors open for me all the time. I've never let a door slam in anyone's face. No one's ever... The only time people have ever not held a door open for me is in the US, which I find so interesting. Like here, you open a door, if there's someone close behind you, you just keep it open for them. You know, that's just how it works. If there's someone nearby, you hold the door open for them. But in the US, that didn't happen. People just kind of went in and let the door close, and I was so taken aback by it. I was genuinely so shocked by that, but you know, that's fine. I wouldn't ever be offended by someone opening the door for me. I don't know anyone who would be. I don't really understand why that's an important point. And finally, they say that you should be grateful when a man respects you.
Be grateful when a man goes out of his way to show you respect.
I don't owe gratitude to someone who treats me like a person. I think we should just respect everyone. I will just be like neutral if a man respects me, because a man should respect me. Women should respect me. Everyone should respect me, and I will respect everyone. You know, unless someone has done something specifically that has lost my respect, I will universally, ground level, respect everyone, because everyone deserves to be respected. And I'm not going to be grateful to you if you just respect me and treat me like a person. Don't teach girls that they have to be grateful for men respecting them. Treat boys that they should just respect girls. Like, what are you talking about? They also have these other standalone videos that are like telling stories to like teach lessons, right? They have a whole video about universal healthcare. And I just wanted to talk about this because I just truly do not understand this point that right-wingers try to make about universal healthcare, right? This is a story about a family in Canada, and it's set from the perspective of this boy. And his father and his uncle don't talk to each other anymore. And the reason they don't talk anymore is because their father died from stomach cancer. And these two brothers had a disagreement because this boy's father wanted him to stay in Canada and receive, you know, universal healthcare treatment, to go and get like government funded treatment for the cancer, whereas his brother wanted him to go to the US and just pay for the care so that he could be treated quicker. And he decided to stay in Canada and he died. And so this kid is like, why didn't he just, you know, go to the US? He would have been treated quicker. Because in this video it tells you all about how in Canada with healthcare, with funded healthcare, what happens is that, you know, the level of care is much lower. And also, in order to get treatment for anything, you have to be on a waiting list that can be months or even years. Whereas in the US, you pay for it and you get treated immediately. And it's fantastic. And then on top of that, in Canada, you're still paying for it. It just comes out of your taxes. And it's a really large amount that comes out of your taxes. You pay so much money in order to receive free healthcare.
Marcel knows his family pays a lot in taxes, but that's normal in Canada. And what's wrong with waiting weeks or months when you need to see a doctor? That's normal too, right?
And I've never understood this. There are so many things wrong with this because, one, under public healthcare, private healthcare still exists. You still both exist, right? If you can afford private healthcare, you can get private healthcare. However, if you can't afford private healthcare, you still are able to be treated. And yes, sometimes there is a wait list, but that depends on what it's for, right? So like, for example, I'm currently on a waiting list to get my wisdom teeth out because, you know, I need my wisdom teeth taken out. I'm having an appointment in a couple weeks. It's taken about 3 months, I think. I've been on a waiting list to be able to get my consultation to get my teeth taken out, which is, you know, a bit of an annoyingly long time because they flare up and I've been in a bit of pain every now and then. However, I absolutely do have the option to spend £1,000 to get them taken out sooner. That is an option. I can go privately if I wanted to. However, I don't have £1,000 to spend to get my teeth taken out. I don't want to spend that much money to get my teeth taken out if they're not causing me that much pain and I'm able to live with it for a few months. I'm gonna do it for free. So that's what I'm doing. Alternatively, when I got my tonsils out when I was 13, I did it privately because my family's health insurance covered that. So privately, I think that would have cost like $10,000 or something ridiculous. But my health insurance covered it, so I got it for free or for very little. However, you know, I didn't have to wait at all for that. If I wanted to go publicly, I think the wait list is like 2 years, which is kind of a long time. However, if it is urgent, like if it is you need your tonsils out right now or you're going to be like suffer serious consequences, you get moved up. They do it immediately. I went to hospital once for unknown reason because I had like severe abdominal pain and they took me in for ultrasounds. They did some tests and they were like, okay, we're gonna have to do keyhole surgery to figure out what the fuck is going on. And I had surgery that day and stayed overnight so I could be monitored, went home the next day, completely free, because that was urgent care. They needed to take care of me immediately. You can do whatever is best for you, but this way people who live in poverty, who can't afford healthcare, also get treated. And then on top of that, saying that it's paid like a super high amount of taxes paid is so beyond me. Because like, hey Americans, did you know you pay health insurance? And health insurance is fucking expensive. I Googled this, right? So our tax brackets in the UK, and the same as in Canada, and the same as in New Zealand and elsewhere, is the same. In fact, income tax in Canada is lower than income tax in the US. Not by much, but it is lower. And only, I think, 10% of income tax goes towards healthcare. Whereas in the US, a lot of your employers take your income tax and they also take your health insurance money. And you're paying a lot more in health insurance than we pay in tax for healthcare. So I think, right, like income tax here, like the bracket, like 20%. And of that 20% of my income I'm paying, 10% of that goes to the NHS. So it's like less than £100 a month. How much do you pay for health insurance every month? A lot more. A lot more. I Googled this. On average, it's $500 a month for health insurance. Like, who's paying more? Your tax money all goes to the fucking military. Who's that helping? And you're like, it's so expensive to get healthcare. You're just lying. You're straight up lying through your teeth. And now you're teaching children that social systems are bad, that universal healthcare is bad because it costs them too much money and they're not going to be able to get treated. You are fear-mongering. You will receive treatment and you will receive it quickly if you need to receive it quickly. And if you have the money to pay for like better care, that is also an option. You are able to do that. Stop fear-mongering and lying and teaching incorrect things. The fact that a lot of adults truly believe this too is so baffling. They seem genuinely unaware that private healthcare exists in countries where public healthcare exists. Like both happen, okay? Please understand that. On top of all of this, you know, they have a bunch of videos that are talking about like Christian values. They are talking about like, they have a lot of climate denying videos. They have a lot of just racist videos in general, telling stories about people from all over the world, but just being completely, you know, fear-mongering about it and spreading misinformation about it. They have videos that are so anti-communism, anti-socialism, and pro-capitalism. They have videos that are anti-queer, that are forced discrimination while claiming to be anti-discrimination. And all of this is now allowed to be shown in schools in Florida. And that is such a terrifying and horrifying thought and such an awful thing that is happening. We need to be encouraging inclusivity at school. We need to be talking about our differences and teaching actual factual things. As much as they like to say that we force an agenda, no one is doing that. We are not doing that. Just because you don't agree with it or it doesn't align with your values doesn't mean that it's brainwashing. And I can actively say that this is purely because I know that it's not based on anything true. And it's also putting religion in schools, which isn't okay. You know, I'm pretty sure in your constitution it says separate state from religion, and you love your constitution and you can't seem to fucking follow it. You know, I'd say I hope there's change soon, but this was the change, you know, and it's just it's so awful to see happen. And I really hope that, you know, the kids in Florida are okay. I hope the people in Florida are okay. I hope that we are able to move forwards, and I hope that something is done about this. I hope that parents complain. I hope that, you know, if your kids are being taught this at school, you complain to the schools, you send letters, you do whatever you can, because it can't happen. Yeah, telling the truth isn't brainwashing. Teaching love and acceptance isn't brainwashing. People have a big problem about teaching sex education at primary school. That's a different conversation for another video. That wasn't really mentioned in this, but you know, that's definitely a conversation to have for another video about what like sex education means for younger children and what that looks like in different age brackets. It's horrifying, it's awful, and I'm so sorry that this is happening. And I do hope that, you know, we're able to undo it before too much damage is done. No amount of teaching stuff like this will remove queer people from existence. It's not going to remove trans people. It's not going to get rid of the history that has happened. It's not going to change the fact that slavery existed and has negative impacts to this day. It doesn't change anything. You're just hiding the truth from people. And with the amount of information that is out there, you know, a lot of kids are going to figure this out sooner or later, and they're going to be angry about it. You're not erasing things from existence. You are just hiding them. And that is not okay. Yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. It was a little bit more serious than usual in a way. It was a bit more newsy. You know, let me know if you liked this style of video. Maybe I'll do more videos that are a bit more like this. I don't know. Let me know. A massive thank you to my Sprout and Above patrons whose names are up on the screen right now. And a huge thank you to my Kiwi Cat patrons. Harry, Toulouse, Bobby, Sparrow, Josh, Mandy, Robbie, Ikazel, Jessica, Eldo, Trini, Ida, Raven, Danielle, Inoli Like Cannoli, Elias, Evie, Jewel, Apollo, Taylor is Trying, Boston, and Chris. I love and appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for joining. If you would like to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/savvycat. Click the top link in the description. For as little as £1 a month, you get my videos a day early, as well as podcasts a week early. Then for £3 and up, you get things such as outtakes, bonus mini podcasts, live streams, and more. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, The Queer Kiwi, and Twitter, That Queer Kiwi. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Keep fighting. I love you. Mwah.